Hello and welcome to Undrafted, a Dynasty Game Theory podcast brought to you by OTC Fantasy. I am your host, Scott Belanger, a.k.a. Jax Falcone. You can find me on Twitter at Dino Game Theory. This is episode number 247. Let's roll. And I just got to say, the OTCFFB.com is gaining a lot of support. Y'all are amazing. We're hearing so much feedback, so much positive feedback. And the other great thing is we are responding to feedback of improvement and functionality and everything. You guys are all part of this. Anybody who's a subscriber and commenting to us and sharing their feedback and information that they're hoping that the site can do, we're not fixing it, we're improving it in real time. So go to OTCFFB.com. It is time. If you are in more than one sleeper league, it will save your life. And not only that, it's great for all these drafts. We're all in these drafts. It's great. Wait until the regular season when you start to use the lineup function of this. If you're a portfolio player, you must go to OTCFFB.com and sign up right now. And without further ado, we've got Mr. Theo Gremminger. Feels like a home game when I get Theo on. Theo and I have had so many pods together, whether it be on his show, my show, the old Sonic Truth that we did together so many times. Like, we've just talked Dynasty so many times. Goat District. Theo and I go way back. Theo and I really see things similarly, but we have enough differences that I think it's an interesting conversation when I talk to him on or off the air. Theo Gremminger is the hardest working man in fantasy over at Fantasy Points. Theo, welcome.
Yeah, we podcasted together so many times, and we sort of maintain contact even when we're not podding together so often that this feels like we haven't podded in forever. It's probably been like 2 months since we officially did a podcast. But you're frequently on Dynasty Life. I'm frequently over here. It's always good chopping it up. We're actually in a rookie draft together where I think I'm OTC or I'm in the hole right now or on deck, one of those. So we're in mutual leagues now as well, a couple of them. So always good to chop it up. It's been like an incredibly busy time for me as it has been for you, but it's always great to get over here and talk some Dynasty with you.
Yes. By the way, we're working on Sleeper. We've got the OTC FFB for Sleeper. You're going to be very, very happy to know we're working on an FFPC.
Speaking my language. You're speaking my language. I'm in the
it's going to be amazing
streets right now. I did a startup. I'm actually splitting a startup right now with Scott Barrett. Scott wanted to. Scott had like a lowball trade offer that went viral. So he's trying to regain his reputation in the high-stakes streets. So I'm like, okay, we'll do an FFPC startup.
Yeah.
But we're doing one of these teams where we're acquiring all of the 2027 first that we can and sort of like pushing it back a year to try to get access to the 2027 class. But we took Brock Bowers. We stuck and pick in the first round with Brock Bowers, tight end premium, super flex tight end premium. And then we were like on the clock in like the late second and couldn't move this one pick. And we ended up sticking and picking with Colston Loveland. The idea being like we figured out tight end at the elite level, and with the tight end premium scoring, we'll have like one of these crazy tight end builds. And if we don't add anybody else this year and it becomes very 2027 based, we'll have Brock Bowers and Colston Loveland, who could be like 40 points per game for like the next 6 years at the tight end position. So it was pretty fun. But yeah, I'm excited to see your site with the FFPC. That's awesome, man. That's that's my favorite place to play fantasy.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. We realize that there's like millions of users on Sleeper, and I don't know how many are portfolio, higher stakes, Dynasty players. Who knows? I don't know the exact number. That doesn't really matter. But all of those people who are doing that are finding great value with OTC FFB. But we realize that everybody on FFPC could stand to have a little bit better interface and a little bit better tools to help them manage their teams, obviously. Because if you're a portfolio player, efficiency is super important. So yeah, we're excited to bring that to you. You're gonna be thrilled. what else was I going to say? Yeah, dude, I'm just so excited to see what you guys are doing over there. Startup season is among us. With that build and with everything that every new startup I feel like has um, a different path. In other words, sometimes like I did a startup last year where I traded my first round pick for 3 first round picks. You know what I mean? My first round startup was like the 109 or something like that. And I've never done that before. And by the way, the team is dope now. It really worked out. But nonetheless, I'd never, walked that path before because it's normally not available to you. Normally, by the time you get to the 108 in a startup, there's no team that has, multiple future firsts that they're also willing to trade, right? That's a very unique situation. I guess my point is so isn't Bowers, Loveland, and with 27 picks. So you're walking a fresh path, and that's kind of the fun part about a startup is you might have a plan, but sometimes you have to play the draft as it comes to you a little bit too.
I think that's
right?
the key with startups is you never really know what you're going to get in terms of what your league mates' goals are. We've talked about this on past podcasts,
right.
And I know that shout out to Scott Connor and Shane. They've talked about this a lot where you used to be the edge was trading down and getting those future first. Now sometimes you get into leagues where there's 8 managers trying to do that same deal. So then the edge becomes actually moving the 2027 first, and you're going to get some unbelievable value for it. And maybe that manager is chasing Jeremiah Smith or one of these quarterbacks like a Dante Moore, and they end up with the 108, 109. A couple guys go back to school, and maybe they're kind of left holding the bag. So I think you've got to gauge it. You've got to have an open mind when you start when you're in startups. You'll sort of know because of the message boards where everybody gets on the message board and said willing to trade down. Then you're in one of those leagues. If you're in another league where you start getting trade offers involving first, then you're okay, these guys are pushing the chips in for year one. So I think stay open-minded and sort of stay, like a Bruce Lee expression, stay water, be water in these startups and extract as much value as possible, whether it's the appropriate pick when you're on the clock that gives you the biggest edge, or acquiring those future rookie picks. Or sometimes this, it's that you're in a tier where you like some guys. Can I move back, get another player that's in my queue, and maybe go from move my 8th and get back into the late 6th and gives me another option for a guy. So all different ways to sort of skin a cat in the startup field, but that's why it's so much fun. And like you said, you sort of blaze a trail any way you want to cut it.
Yeah, and I think this would be actually a good time for us to sort of, we're going to play show sheet parkour.
Yeah,
we're just going to go all over the place. In other words, we're not going in order. I wanted to mention that this. I think you're going to disagree with me in my take of the first part of the rookie draft, because my take is that anywhere 2 through 5, I'm willing to sort of trade back to the 5 because I have my wide receiver 1 is most people's wide receiver 3. My 102 is most people's 105. And so for that reason, why wouldn't I almost never want to take my 102 at the 102 because I don't need to. I'd much rather trade back, find a trade partner, gain some additional value, and go from there. Now, I will say that's not always easy because there's not always someone willing. First of all, there's only one 105. So if you don't make a deal with the person that's 105, they don't want to move. Well, that plan's done. So maybe you go to the 104. Well, I can't go to the 106. Maybe I can, but I don't know that I can go to the 106. You see what I'm saying? So the game theory starts to become, okay, well, how do I get what I want from this rookie draft? Well, I'm at the 102 in our draft, and I was on that clock for forever. Now, what was interesting, is I had many offers for the 102. So sitting at the 102 in a rookie draft, a lot of people will just pick Carnell Tate and move on, and that's fine. That's fine. I get that. Or pick Fernando Mendoza and move on. For me, I'm trying to exact value. I'm trying to stay in that 102 to 105 range and get more. I stayed on the clock forever. I had some really amazing offers. I'm not going to necessarily talk about all the specific offers I had because we're still active in that league, I guess, and you're sitting right here. But I will say I had some crazy offers. And the lesson I learned was I just stayed patient, and I finally got the move from the 102 to the 104, and I picked up Jacoby Myers. Now, some people would say, well, I wouldn't trade from the 102 to the 104 for Jacoby Myers. For me, I wasn't even moving because I'm going to take the same guy at the 102 that I took at the 104. So to me personally, I got free Jakobi Meyers, me. Now, that is something that I think you have to understand how you're playing the board versus how everybody else might be playing the board and act accordingly.
Yeah,
Does
and I
that
think
make
the
any
general
sense?
takeaway is we're not trying to win calculators. We're trying to win leagues. So if you have conviction on
Right.
your pick,
Right.
and you have conviction on your guy, and you want to push the chips in on your guy, then sticking and picking and taking a guy who like the field thinks is more valuable because you did like the right thing instead of what your conviction says, that's not necessarily the way to play it. I think you tried your best to move to the 5. You didn't get there, but you got down to the 4. You still got your guy, and then you got like sort of an innings eater, a wide receiver 3, a flex. In your league is a deep league, so a guy like Jakobi
Yeah.
Meyers is going to be locked in
Very.
your lineup in week 1 and probably barring injury for the entire season. And does Jakobi Meyers have a 2-year pathway and not just a 1-year pathway? I mean, we'll see. They seem to really like him in that offense. So I think it's fine to go and get your guy. Sort of my biggest takeaway is we heard from all the people on X, like when we get close to rookie draft season, it's sort of like the power of the quarterback in super flex leagues is going to take over, and you're going to see Fernando Mendoza as the 102 locked in, and all these wide receivers are going to fall. And then you see like the kind of crazy, unhinged, well, maybe we should consider Fernando Mendoza at the 101 just because he's the only quarterback. Like, people weren't really doing that this year, but there was a couple of people doing that. But what I was surprised at is in my leagues, Mendoza was not the 102. I saw it in only like one league, and I'm in a lot of these FFPC like start 10 format leagues, and there was only one league, and the guy had like a Joe Burrow, JJ McCarthy team where has nothing at the QB2 spot, so he had to take Fernando Mendoza at the 102. Every other league, Mendoza fell. So Mendoza was like the 3, the 4, the 5, and somebody would take a wide receiver at the 102. So I understand it. Like, there's some Fernando Mendoza enthusiasts out there, like our guy Brett Whitefield, really into him. I know Dan Williamson has talked about him as the 102 for him. But I saw Carnell Tate, I saw Jordan Tyson, and then I even saw Lemon ahead of Mendoza, where Mendoza falls to the 5. So, and then you throw in the Jadarian Price stuff, where Price has steamed up so much, you're starting to see him going FFPC,
especially in FFPC.
So FFPC single quarterback leagues, he was a rocket ship. Jadarian Price consistently went in the top 4, and there were a couple of high stakes leagues where he went to the 102. There's always going to be running back enthusiasm there. I took him in one league where I won it last year. I made a big move to get the 101, had Jeremiyah Love. Then mid-draft, I ended up acquiring the 106, moved from the 106 to the 105, ended up getting a Jadarian Price share. For me, it's like, I thought I was Mr. Jadarian Price in the buildup. I went to war with a lot of people on podcasts throughout the whole draft saying, no, this guy's going to be top 40 draft capital. This guy's actually good. He's going to start. And we'll have to rank him as like a top 20 running back in Dynasty because of the draft capital. You're going to see he's going to get the Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, or better draft capital. And there's some stuff we like about him for fantasy. A lot of really smart people pushed back on me. I sort of stood strong with that one. And then I gloated a lot during our draft coverage over at Fantasy Points because we were doing it live. So like for me, I thought I'd end up with a ton of Jadarian Price in like the mid first. I ended up kind of maneuvering around to get some, so I ended up having like more exposure to him. I think he's a steam guy during the summer. You're already hearing like he is in the Kenneth Walker role. People love that.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a detriment that he's going to be in the Kenneth Walker role. Like, for a rookie, that's a really good role. It's not a good role for year 4 Kenneth Walker, but it was a good role for year 1 Jadarian Price. So I think he'll continue to steam up. But yeah, 102 is really spicy, really, really spicy to put that kind of draft capital, even in single, in him.
Yeah, and I think, I made that case with Jacob Sanderson that, I thought that Jadarian Price would steam all the way until week 1. And then, of course, week 1 could change everything, of course. Once football is played, we know. The cool thing is that we know that after week 1, there'll be overreaction central, no matter what happens. No matter what happens, it'll be overreaction central. So we're ready for that. I think, you sort of allude to it. I want to talk about, well, hey, real quick, are you, does the David Njoku news scare you for Aronde at all? I just,
Yeah, I mean, not
kind of
necessarily
curious here.
scare me. Njoku looked kind of cooked last year, and we saw him overtaken by Harold Fannin. So I think
I
Aronde
agree.
Gadsden's the best.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even close in terms of who has the higher fantasy ceiling this year and beyond. It's clearly Aronde Gadsden. I just think that it's an offense that's going to score a ton of points, but it's going to be maybe a little more balanced between a lot of guys than the market's dictating. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think Justin Herbert right now, if you're a best ball or redraft guy, Justin Herbert's like this tremendous value. And I know like Mike Clay came out with like a really, really pessimistic projection for him. And I think it cooled the Jets for sort of like the masses. But for me, I think he's very wrong on this one. And I think Herbert's going to have maybe a career year.
Right.
I also think there's a lot of pressure on Harbaugh internally where anytime you hear like Jim Harbaugh talk about Herbert, it's almost like he feels a pressure on himself to get this guy an MVP trophy, to get this guy a Super Bowl ring, where he has an elite quarterback.
Right.
He's got to get him like sort of what he deserves. And I think the McDaniel like wants to use this as a platform to get himself a really good head coaching job. So like the OC and the head coach are both committed to getting Herbert this like magical season. I think that could happen. But when we look at the Njoku signing, for me, it's going to be a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of Alec Ingold.
Yeah.
Mike McDaniel's an innovator, and all these sort of smart guys are using heavy packages. Look at sort of what Liam Cohen's trying to accomplish, looking what Sean McVay is accomplishing over in LA. So I think you're going to see a lot of 2 tight end sets. There's going to be a loser in the wide receiver room, and there's going to be a huge winner.
Right.
When you say this to people, it's Lad McConkey this year. Lad McConkey, this is JSN season for him. I don't know. He's steamed up. He's expensive still. So like there's some smart people like Ryan Heath I work with at Fantasy Points all in on McConkey this year. I've sort of brought it up like if you want to pay me in Dynasty for McConkey like he's back to being a top 10 wide receiver, go for it. I'll sell him. I think there's going to be a winner between it's gross to say, I think between Quentin Johnston and Trey Harris, one of them's going to have a good season this year just based on this offense, based on what he can do. And then I think that Aronde Gadsden could still hit. It's just there's more mouse to feed. So again, tight end's a low bar. What are we projecting Aronde Gadsden to get to target wise is I think the big question. But if we can get him in that 85 to 90 target range, I think he's going to be a viable fantasy tight end for sure because it's an offense that I think is going to print. And I think Aronde Gadsden has shown that he can put up spike weeks and be very efficient with his targets. So he's a range of outcomes guy, but I think if you're lowering your expectations because of David Njoku, then you weren't really in on him to begin with.
Yeah, I think this is one of those offenses where if you do any projections, some of the offenses you get in there and you're like, this is kind of easy. I think this is one of those offenses where you go, I'm not sure exactly, right? I'm not sure exactly because what we're not sure of is how much is the tight end 2 going to play? How much is the tight end 3 going to play? How much is the wide receiver 2? How much is the wide receiver 3? How much is the wide receiver 4 going to play? Right? Because you mentioned Alec Ingold. He's brought in for purpose. He's not there to catch passes, but he is there to take one of the tight ends or the wide receivers off the field and, play a different type of football, which does concentrate the targets, which is why I think guys like Ryan Heath and others are steaming up Lad McConkey, because if you're going to have anyone on that team as the alpha, it's Lad. I mean, right? So we look at that, we say, okay, well, if it's going to be anybody, it's going to be Lad. When you have multiple tight ends and or fullbacks on the field, that means you necessarily have fewer wide receivers, which means that wide receivers that are on the field get targeted at a higher rate. This is just a math equation, not a philosophical one. It's just factual. That's how it works. That's how JSN got there. So the comps from Lad to JSN are apt in that way, that he's going to see more, 2 tight end sets and 2 running back sets that are going to necessarily increase his target share of the overall offense. I'm with you. I don't know exactly what they're going to do. It's almost like they saw the Fannin Njoku tandem and they were like, yeah, that works pretty good. And, maybe that's what we're going to see. Maybe we're going to see, and that's also considering that Njoku stays healthy and is able to play at that level. As you said, he was a little bit cooked and a little bit hurt last year. He didn't move all that well. He didn't move like 25-year-old David Njoku or 22-year-old David Njoku, that's for sure. This gets me to talking about some of the offenses we want to invest in, and it's going to spill over to a bunch of conversations. I want to talk about some of those offenses right after this. Welcome back to the program. I'm here, Jax Falcone, with Theo Gremminger. Theo, we're going to talk about some offenses to target, I think, in fantasy in general. I think that's one of the things I think about, especially with running backs. We're going to get there a little bit later with some of the other younger running backs, but sometimes you look at a running back and go, I'm not so sure he can actually get there. Is there any ceiling here in the offense itself? Because I want an offense that's going to score points, convert, get more opportunities, be in the game late, lots of stuff happening. What offenses are you targeting where you're like, this is where the fantasy gold is? What are your thoughts?
I think the teams we sort of talked about in the pre-show, there's like the easy ones. The Bengals are going to score a ton this year. Joe Burrow healthy, the wide receiver tandem, Chase Brown. It's such an easy offense to predict when those guys are healthy. Chase Brown, I think, is tremendous value right now, especially in redraft and best ball, because the volume's been fantastic 2 years in a row. Dallas, who averaged 27 points per game last year, they're fully back. Barring anything crazy with George Pickens, that's an offense that I think we can bank on. Year two for the coaching staff, and things were just working. Javonte Williams back again, so they're going to continue to score very easily. The Rams look like Super Bowl or bust. That's a team that's going to continue to score a ton. Mm-hmm. The Lions, you listed them. Easy one. The one you didn't list was the Buffalo Bills, where Buffalo, 28 points per game last year, 30 points per game the year before. Offensive hire in Joe Brady. And then they bring in Pete Carmichael, another offensive coordinator we think is smart. And then they did a few things this offseason in terms of bringing in a DJ Moore, drafting a Skylar Bell. Maybe we see additional snap share for a guy like a Dalton Kincaid. And of course, James Cook has become this foundational piece to our dynasty rosters at the running back position. I think they're going to be really, really good. I mean, after that, it's a little bit of a mystery. We talked about the LA Chargers. The LA Chargers would be sort of my bet as the big breakout offense, the team that's going to go from being a bottom 10 offense to a top 5 offense. We see it pretty much every year. They were the 24th highest scoring offense last year. They could be the 4th highest scoring offense this year. And then I think we've got to talk about the Chicago Bears, because last year was year one for Ben Johnson. They averaged 25.7 points per game. A lot of continuity with that team this year. They embraced the two young guys down the stretch with Luther Burden and Colston Loveland. And now you're going to have Caleb Williams in his second year running this offense. Rome Odunze will be healthy. And the running backs are back. So I think that's an interesting one when you look at Chicago. Jacksonville is interesting too, because they had a lot of attrition, but we sort of believe in Liam Cohen with the rejuvenated Trevor Lawrence. I think they're an offense where that's an easy one to invest in pieces, because Parker Washington's cheap, Bhayshul Tuten's cheap. You got Jacoby Myers as a ham sandwich throw-in in that trade. So there's a lot of ways to get access to the Jacksonville offense, despite it being an offense that we think could score a lot of points. So there's the top of the food chain offenses are sort of pretty clear. The one wild card is the Seattle Seahawks, where everybody's expecting them to take a big step back. They averaged 29 points a game last year. They add I think a good Kenneth Walker replacement in Jadarian Price, but they're all cheap besides Jackson Smith and Jigba. Even Jadarian Price is a 5th, 6th round pick in redraft right now. He'd be the second highest skill position player drafted. But Rashid Shaheed is free. The tight ends are basically free. Collectively as a tandem. I think that's an easy dynasty access where you can get an AJ Barner and Elijah Arroyo, combine them, throw them on your roster pretty easily, and see if one of them really separates this year. Torrey Horton's sort of forgotten. He looked good at times last year. And, obviously nobody cares about Sam Darnold. I'm not saying you need to go get him, but he could easily crush his ADP this year too. So they're a fun offense that actually showed it last year, but it's sort of is the Clint Kubiak effect going to be that strong, or are they an offense that's going to sort of do things that are similar? They could regress and average 2 points fewer per game, and they'd still be a top 5 scoring offense.
Right. Let's stay with Seattle just for a moment. I was going to ask, is Cooper Kupp still alive? What is the what is the situation? Because I feel like he muddies the waters here to a point where, like, if you just told me Cooper Kupp retired tomorrow, I would really be interested in Rashid Shaheed and or Torrey Horton, because I think one of them might have a path to relevance. If Cooper Kupp sort of just plays, even if he doesn't perform very well, like he could do, and I mean, he would love to do what Keenan Allen did last year, but he could do what Keenan Allen did last year to that, to the weapons on the Chargers, where he just sort of blocked out the sun for them and just I think he took 120 targets off that team. I'm not so sure Cooper Kupp's going to do that, but in terms of a target share, what are our thoughts about Cooper Kupp? Because I don't really want to start him, but I also wish he didn't play anymore, so to speak. In fantasy.
I mean, how much overlap is there with Rashid Shaheed and him? Where last year, sort of the argument was he's going to hurt Jackson. I mean, it wasn't our argument, but there were people in fantasy making the argument that he's going to hurt Jackson Smith and Jigba by taking away those slot snaps, and then JSN just goes nuclear and changes his entire game and sort of fulfills his destiny. Coming in from Ohio State, Cooper Kupp, I think there's not a whole lot of overlap with Rashid Shaheed, but I do think, like you said, it's the available targets, and Rashid Shaheed's ceiling season probably coincides with Cooper Kupp missing time. It's still worth taking shots on Shaheed, though, because we look at what he was able to accomplish in sort of downtrodden offenses in New Orleans, and we look at how effective he was last year special teams wise for Seattle. So maybe they embrace him a little bit more in terms of what he can bring to the table as a wide receiver from like the get-go, and not having to blend him into the offense mid-season after acquiring him in a trade. Instead, you have him, for the entirety of the preseason and the offseason, and they have like a real plan for Rashid Shaheed. They seemed ecstatic to get Rashid Shaheed when they traded for him last year. They seemed really excited to re-sign him. So I think Shaheed's sort of a little bit of a forgotten man there, and he's really, really cheap right now in all formats. So
he's very cheap. Theo, I have him in a couple of spots where I've tried to sell off him or use his value to sort of tier up. I'd throw him into a trade where I'm trading 2 or 3 players, one of them including Shaheed, and people are just not really interested in valuing him, right? They're just like, nah, you know what I mean? There's not any desire to get Shaheed onto their roster, I feel like, anyway, in any of my trade talks. I've not seen anybody sort of counter back and be like, oh, Shaheed's available. I'm going to counter this, value down a little bit and see if I can get Shaheed and whatever this guy's selling me. So anyway, long story short, I'm not so sure that he is that difficult to attain. And by the way, just to clear this up, I wasn't suggesting that Cooper Kupp and Shaheed have overlap, but this is a team that also chooses to play a lot of 2 wide receiver sets. And when Cooper is on the field, when Kupp's on the field, JSN's certainly on the field. That means that Shaheed or Horton are not on the field, and they're not eligible for targets from the bench. And that's really what I meant, and yeah, even if Kupp plays 40 or 50% of the snaps or something, it's still enough opportunity lost for Shaheed and Horton to find their way onto the field. And the thing about both Shaheed and Horton, unlike even especially Cooper Kupp, is that they're available to make big plays, right? They're available to make downfield plays. So even just a couple of targets a game can really change their fortunes. We saw the type of athlete that Shaheed is. We saw Torrey Horton, even in his rookie season on limited play, make big plays. So I guess that's what I'm, kind of curious about. Well, let's jump to the running back there, Jadarian Price. Charbonnet's likely out for quite a long time. You said that Jadarian Price was going to get the Kenneth Walker role in that offense, which would be great for for Jadarian Price. Who then gets the Zach Charbonnet role? Is that Emmanuel Wilson or George Holani or other or no one? Is that where people are kind of penciling Jadarian Price into this monster role? Do you think that actually happens? How do you handicap this running back field?
I think they like George Holani as like a veteran presence on the team. They played him last year in the playoffs. There was games where he was getting 20 snaps.
Yep.
But you're talking about an undrafted free agent that the organization wisely signed. He's no threat for fantasy. I think people who are chasing George Holani, it's really it's kind of a weird argument to make. Emmanuel Wilson is interesting. Wilson looked good in Green Bay. He was another guy who really, really earned it. I believe he was a UDFA or 7th rounder, one of the two, right? Yeah, so
I think so. I think
both
you're
of those
right. I think
guys
it
were
was UDFA.
exceedingly low drafted players, and they're competing with a player that Seattle viewed. I mean, they took him in the first round. Even if they wanted to trade back, they weren't able to, and they
Yeah.
stuck and picked. And then they also did that with a team that didn't have a whole lot of draft picks. So they're like, Jadarian Price is our guy. We're
Right.
taking Jadarian Price. So I think a ceiling case for Jadarian Price is going to be higher than maybe what we saw with Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet in the split. And Zach Charbonnet might not be back until like week 10. So the thing about Jadarian Price is, from a game theory perspective, dynasty-wise, you have a chance for a really, really fast start. There might be a chance that people are pushing Jadarian Price into like the RB1 range in Dynasty by like mid-season if he does get this like higher volume role that's like better than what we saw with Kenneth Walker in most sports of his career, except for, when Charbonnet went down. I also think we'll find out really quickly if he's going to catch the ball at the next level. And I refuse to believe that a guy this athletic isn't going to be able to at least be an opportunistic pass catcher. Not something like crazy, but can he emulate the Kenneth Walker pass catching role, maybe some of the Zach Charbonnet dump downs, and just catch a couple of dump down passes? I think he absolutely can. And I dove into this a little bit like during the NFL draft process. Like when he came to Notre Dame, he had a reputation as a guy who caught balls in high school. He was like this well-rounded running back in high school. I don't remember the final stat, but he caught a number of passes as a high school player where, passing games are not really dumping down to the running back at the high school level at a high rate. I want to say he had like north of 50 catches in high school. If anybody wants to fact check me on that one, go for it. Yeah, go for a Jadarian Price high school stat
please.
fact check. But he was a player that came to Notre Dame with a big reputation as like a well-rounded running back. We know he's got the explosive ability. Brett Whitefield loves the vision, the patience. And you're seeing some of these. I mean, people laugh at the Scott McLaughlin comments, but like McLaughlin's coming out of left field saying like this is his guy in this draft, and he is comparing his running style to Nick Chubb. Like, what is the benefit of Scott McLaughlin just to say something crazy? I mean, the guy did have a lot of hits. People are like, oh, he's out of the league. But Scott McLaughlin also had a number of hits in terms of evaluation, including Nick Chubb. So I think it's interesting. Jadarian Price, I think people are having, you have to like get rid of your priors with Price. If you were one of these people that was very negative towards him as a prospect, the NFL just told you what they thought about him. I understand that there's guys who fall to the end of the first round and maybe don't hit at the running back position, but first round draft capital at the running back spot is a really strong indicator for us. And the role looks good, and the offense printed last year. So Jadarian Price can beat us with goal line carries in this offense. Jadarian Price can beat us with better than expected volume. And if Jadarian Price catches 40 passes next year, I think people are just going to be losing their minds saying that this is such a mispriced guy for us. We have to change it up. So I'm into it. I'm into Jadarian Price, and I wish I had a little bit more in Dynasty. I'd be open-minded to trading for him, but I don't think you're going to have a window, because your window might be if he fails out the gate and Zach Charbonnet comes back, maybe you do have a window next year. But I think more likely than not, he's going to have good volume to start the year and a lot of buzz throughout the summer.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I don't think there's much of a buyback opportunity, unless it's one of those things where, it's like the Jonathan Taylor thing where somehow or another he's not playing and nobody can figure out why, and they think he's a bust, but he's not. Which happens. It famously happened to Nick Chubb, actually. So maybe they do the same thing. All of a sudden, Emmanuel Wilson is getting 15 to 20 carries and Jadarian Price getting 5 or 10. And they're like, people are losing their mind because they played him in their RB2 slot, didn't make any catches, just 5 or 10 carries in 2 straight games out of the gate, and they just lose their mind. That's definitely the fickle dynasty crowd these days. So if there's a game or two where that happens, especially just 2 games, because 2 games will feel like a trend and people will lose their mind, you'll be able to buy back in then. But I actually don't expect that to be the case. It's funny that you mentioned the Nick Chubb thing for Jadarian Price, because Kenneth Walker, I famously called half Chubb, which of course is super funny. And then this past year, I asked if Jadarian Price was as good a prospect as Ken Walker was. So I guess that makes Jadarian Price a quarter Chubb. So for those listening at home, mark that down. Let's go to, what was the other offense you mentioned I wanted to go to?
Chicago, Jacksonville.
Sure. Yeah, let's go to Jacksonville. Jacksonville, I think, is one of those teams where they come out and they say that Travis Hunter is going to play cornerback only, and then just recently they're like, no, he's gonna play wide receiver too. So now we've got this four-headed monster, this Brian Thomas Jr., Jacoby Myers, Parker Washington, Travis Hunter at wide receiver, and it feels like that's just one of those where if you can pick the right answer there, you can probably profit this offseason. How are you handicapping this foursome of wide receivers?
Well, I think it's interesting that it's always like backloaded, where there's backloaded production towards the end of the season. Usually the fantasy ADP marketplace sort of chases it, and there's a lot of recency bias. But with Parker Washington, it's like what he was able to do down the stretch was like completely forgotten. They really leaned into him. He was like in the Chris Godwin role in this Liam Cohen offense. And I don't see why that stops. You've sort of opened up the Parker Washington box. Why would you sort of put it back in? You look at what they did in the Buffalo game, and then in several games, like from like week 15 on, multiple games where he's getting double-digit targets and 20 points, 19 points, and then that huge game against Buffalo in the playoffs. So I think Parker Washington is a little bit mispriced. And you know this as a Patriots fan, where some of these like slot specialists who end up just becoming huge PPR scam type guys, they don't do it as rookies.
Yeah.
They take a little time to be like nuanced. It's sort of like a setup man in Major League Baseball, where like you find this role and all of a sudden you're like really, really good at this one thing. I think sometimes these slot wide receivers, it takes the teams a little while to trust them as sort of like the release safety valve type in the offense. And I think Parker Washington has pathways where he could be a PPR scam guy and start for us all year long. And then there's a chance that like he becomes like the featured guy, and his game sort of correlates with the players that have been successful playing with Trevor Lawrence. You look at guys like the Christian Kirk season, where Christian Kirk had that really big year when he signed as a free agent with Trevor Lawrence. Evan Ingram, who was sort of an overgrown tight end playing, or overgrown wide receiver playing tight end, had that year where they just parked him in the slot and he was catching 105 passes or so from the tight end position. So I think Parker Washington, really strong bet for this year. Jacoby Myers, you're going to get a little bit of a discount because he's a little bit older, and like nobody's like chasing it. He's fine though, but I do think his upside is like, we're not going to see some insane season from Jacoby Myers. I think he could be good enough to start, but I think Parker Washington might be the one I want to bet on. And then BTJ, if he's the one that's like, but you're buy low and then kind of sit on it, because even if he's not having the year that we think he's capable of for Jacksonville, and it becomes a little bit more of a Parker Washington centric offense, BTJ does have the first round pick insulation, where all these trade rumors for him, you're finally going to see some team actually trade for BTJ. Could he have a George Pickens pathway where it's like some seasons of not great fantasy production, and then all of a sudden somebody trades for him, puts him in like a prominent alpha type role, and he bounces back? We've already seen the best season for BTJ. You can't chase that rookie year top 5 production, but I do think him becoming a starter and a locked in starter for you in your fantasy lineup sometime within the next year or two, it's going to happen, but it might not happen in Jacksonville. It just might not work with Trevor Lawrence, and I think that they're fine with it. You bring up Travis Hunter. I know the two of us have talked about him, and I think you pushed the market way down for him. Guys like you who are smart and telling people to sell their Travis Hunter shares, you pushed the market to a point where it's so low now that it's time to maybe rebuy. You saw the really like bottom of the barrel trades going down for him if you play in enough dynasty leagues, where people are like, I'm out. And when you were arguing to sell him, you were arguing to get like a late first, maybe get like an early second rounder, get a 2027 second, something valuable. Like, that market is gone in a lot of leagues. A lot of leagues, like, people are scared to death about him becoming a full-time corner, and they're getting him off of their rosters for like anything. So I think it's a great buyback opportunity for Travis Hunter. If you're in a deep dynasty format, I think you can throw some lowball offers out. Somebody might accept it. And if you're in a rebuild mode, even in like an FFPC type format, he's a good enough talent to sort of like take a chance on. And a year from now, if Parker Washington doesn't hit like I think he could, if BTJ gets moved, if Jacoby Myers has like gets older and starts to regress, then Travis Hunter's pathway in 2027, 2027-8 might be, hey, you're back at wide receiver for the majority of your snaps, and then he could be really good again.
I'm going to give you something. I was on Heath Cummings' show this morning, and he asked me about him a little bit, and he was using the trade tool on our site. It's showing all these trades, and one of the trades that came up was Travis Hunter for Josh Downs, right? And my answer, he was like, which side? I'm like, well, of course I have to be nuanced. And I think it's like, if you're in a shallow league where you can sell a player like Josh Downs, who probably isn't in your starting lineup, for a player like Travis Hunter, I think that's a really smart way to play it, because you're talking about a player that his points above replacement, Josh Downs in a shallow league, has none. Has almost no value, but Travis Hunter could hit big down the line, so it's a great way to go. Conversely, if you're in a deep league like our 14-team start 11, Josh Downs is a starter. You know what I mean? He's actually got real value, so I don't know if I'd make that move in that type of a league. I think in a shallow league where you can, a shallow starting roster, where you can sometimes move a fictional productive player. You have Parker Washington and Josh Downs. You can only play one. We'll trade Josh Downs for Travis Hunter, so you can actually get some higher upside down the line. I think that's right. The other player that's there, by the way, just off the topic here, did you know Parker Washington, first of all, led the team in yards per route run at 2.19. He did lead them in slot snaps, but he also had a 13.2 ADOT. Did you know that? That's
a lot of the analytical people over at Fantasy Points are really, really into him. I had already had a good amount of exposure to Parker Washington. I actually acquired him in an AJ Brown trade where I had like a package of assets coming over, and I got Parker Washington with like Lamar Jackson in like a single QB format, and it was like a pick swap on a team that I'm trying to rebuild. And I felt great about that one. I think like Parker Washington has pathways to outscore AJ Brown this year, even in New England. So I'm into Parker Washington. I think people don't want to buy into him. He was a late round pick. You're talking about 7th round value that took a little while to break through. But like we saw it. I mean, his production was like Amon-Ra St. Brown rookie year, end of the year production. That's what we saw last year. And we saw it in meaningful games for Jacksonville where they viewed themselves as a team who could make a deep run in the AFC playoffs, and they almost beat Buffalo, and they really, really used Parker Washington. So I think Parker Washington could get off to a fast start and be a player that there has to be a correction for in the dynasty marketplace. And I keep gravitating back towards like some of these slot wide receivers. And like once these guys establish themselves, they just become a consistent weapon for like multiple years to come. I think we could see that with P-Dub.
Yeah, like AJ Brown for Parker Washington in the 27th.
Yeah, I've got that offer too. And eventually I ended up being a Lamar Jackson sort of. I think Parker Washington, that's exactly the kind of trade you should be looking to make, where you're getting an additional asset on top, and you're getting access to the 2027 draft class. Like moving AJ Brown for a 2027 first, I haven't seen that go down. There's a chance you can get that trade done in the first month of the season if AJ Brown shows up in New England and averages like 16, 17 points per game. But I think that the better move is to get access to 2 younger pieces, Parker Washington, and then of course the 2027 second, which you could probably do a lot with.
Check your local listings, because there were some trades where AJ Brown was going for 27 first that were mentioned to me by Heath today, and I was like, whoa, wait a second, what are you talking about? So check your local listings. I mean that respectfully, because that every league is different, and those listening, some of you are like, I've got some dumbass motherfuckers in my league. They'll do that stupid trade, and go right ahead.
I did see.
You can actually use OTC. You can use OTC FFB. You can use OTC FFB and use the bulk trade tool, so you can just trade AJ Brown to everybody in your league who has a 27 first.
I did see a AJ Brown for the 105 in a start 10 high stakes FFPC league. Our guy Austin Martin was able to get that plus, and I think with that pick he ended up getting Mekhi Lemon at the 105. So that's similar value to your random 2027 first if Lemon does what we think he's capable of doing.
Yeah. Lemon for me is definitely ahead of for again, Makai is my it's for me it's
Yep.
like you saying Carnell Tate, because Makai is my wide receiver 1 in the class. So for me, that's a huge win. Yeah, I'm not anywhere close to that on AJ Brown, but I think in some markets, in some league economies, he will be. Let's go to Bhayshul Tuten, who I think is like, I mean, is he look, he's proven nothing really in this league. He's not done anything yet. I mean, he was pretty frisky in year 1 as a pass catcher too. Is pretty effective, or at least he scored fantasy points from the pass game. He scored touchdowns and made big plays. Excuse me. Can he be efficient on more volume, and can he earn that volume? If he can, man, this is a potential RB1 in hiding that you're paying RB3 pricing for right now. Feels like a huge buy because the upside.
And I don't want to get too over the top with this, but there's some parallels to year 2 Chase Brown, where Chase Brown broke out as a second-year player.
Yeah.
If we go back in time, it was the Zach Moss versus Chase Brown sort of conundrum, where both those guys sort of settled in. That was a little bit like a cheaper bet for either of them. Tuten's still costing you like a 5th, 6th round pick in redraft leagues right now, whereas Zach Moss and Chase Brown were like both 8th round type picks in redraft. But there was a lot of people on the Zach Moss side, and they sound a lot like the people on the Chris Rodriguez side. And when you look at Bhayshul Tuten, you nailed it. It's the receiving work for him that is the key, because Liam Cohen offenses for back-to-back years, if you go to Fantasy Points data, you can get access to it right over at fantasypoints.com. If you go to Fantasy Points data and you look at like the design targets for running backs, it's back-to-back years where Liam Cohen offenses were like top 5. So in Tampa, it was Rachaad White and Bucky Irving both getting those design targets. And then last year it was like Travis Etienne getting those design targets. Bhayshul Tuten, with his explosiveness, if he can be the back to get the design targets and get the work in the screen game, that alone is a boost. Then you look into, even if Chris Rodriguez is a thing, just how much volume is Chris Rodriguez capable of taking on as sort of a non-well-rounded back? Chris Rodriguez, to me, is more of a player that's going to get a little bit of work between the 20s. And I do think he'll have a role on the team. He's tough. Coaches like him. But Bhayshul Tuten could end up being the guy on the goal line, and he's the explosive play guy, and he's in the screen game. So that's Chase Brown. And Chase Brown exploded when Zach Moss missed time and has never handed that job back. So this front office in Jacksonville loved the speed, the analytical profile of Bhayshul Tuten. I almost think LaQuint Allen is more of a threat to him, because LaQuint Allen taking away the targets is more of a worry to me than Chris Rodriguez somehow nuking Bhayshul Tuten. So I get it. There's a lot of smart guys on the Chris Rodriguez side, but Bhayshul Tuten has the most upside of any back in this offense, and it's not even close.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it's always, we say this all the time on Dynasty Underground. You'll appreciate this. If you win the bet, what do you win, right? If you win the Chris Rodriguez bet, you are winning a 2-down grinder who's probably not going to get targets, who might be the preferred goal line back. And if he sort of, quote unquote, leads the backfield and carries, that'd be a win. That's your win. Like, he gets 55% of the carries and some goal line and not very many targets. If you win the Bhayshul Tuten bet, you've got a guy who's, if he can win 55 to 60% of the carries and project as a bit more of a pass catcher, and again, more of a big play player, I just think that's the guy that they'd rather see in that. And Chris, Chase Brown is exactly the right answer, because it's very similar. They're both speed guys who can, if they make play, if they get opportunities to make plays, they can make big ones, is kind of the idea. And that's what Bhayshul Tuten brings that Chris Rodriguez really just doesn't. So yeah, I totally agree with you. What was the other one? Let's go to
Chicago.
Chicago. Chicago's an interesting one, only insofar as I think now we've got the consolidated target share that we really want with no more DJ Moore. His 100 targets are out of the offense. And, if you just sort of feather those in, and also who's gone is Olamide Zaccheaus, who, had, so there's 170 targets, out of the offense. Now, granted, they don't just all go to one person. They don't really, that's not how it works, but they were certainly taking opportunities away, especially from Luther Burden. and quite frankly from Roma Dunze as well. So I think we can comfortably predict all three of those weapons, Loveland, Odunze, and Burden, at 100 plus targets each.
Yeah,
Do you
I think
agree?
that they're all sort of safe bets. It's, does one have the absolute ceiling season in them, where I think two of them end up becoming really big hits at ADP, and one of them probably is a little bit of a disappointment at ADP. I think that that's sort of the way it's shifting. Colston Loveland seems almost too big to fail, especially at the tight end position. He's so talented.
Yeah.
A lot of your arguments of the guys who left, and then a lot of the coach speak with Ben Johnson, is it's going to be Luther Burden, and Luther Burden has to be this year's breakout guy. But I think Odunze's reached a point where it's worth kicking the tires on trades to him, because the Burden marketplace for me seems really elevated. But yeah, it's a Ben Johnson offense. All three of them have exceedingly high draft capital. All three of them, I think, are talented and have shown that they can put up a spike week for fantasy. The sample size for Burden is the smallest of all three, but maybe the best stylistic fit in like what we've seen in previous Ben Johnson offenses. I think you just want access to these guys, and you want access to Caleb Williams. And I know there's some film guys out there, some at Fantasy Points, and I know our initial projections run at Fantasy Points. Chris Wecht, our projections guy, was sort of down on Caleb this year. Looked at him as a guy who could maybe finish as a low-end QB1, maybe a high-end QB2. I think there's also a chance that Caleb Williams just builds on this season and smashes, and this Ben Johnson offense continues to get better, especially considering how a lot of new pieces were on the offensive line last year. The running back Kyle Monangai mixed in a lot. And you also had, of course, Loveland and Burden, and now you've got this sort of DJ Moore is gone, but maybe that's going to be a net benefit to the offense because you're going to be able to embrace this youth. So I'm just into Chicago. It's not like this makes me so smart or unique. I think a lot of people are going to be into the Chicago Bears offense for a good reason. They also looked awesome in that playoff game against Green Bay. And I think people want to bet on them just continuing to get better and better, and we love the coach.
Yeah, we absolutely love the coach. Really, I mean, I'm with you 1,000%. Look, you look at Luther Burden last year, just to give you I look at this in this way, right? I had it pulled up here. Hold on, let me look. So the ADOT, average depth of target, for Luther Burden was 7.9. For Roma Dunze, it was 14.9. Like, you'd really love to see both those numbers sort of gravitate towards 10, right? Colson Loveland was right at 10. DJ Moore was right at 12.1. Like, they were getting the sort of middle targets, right? And Luther Burden was getting some close to the line of scrimmage stuff, some manufactured stuff. He should probably still continue to get that. But if we can see Roma Dunze just get some easier looks in the offense, I mean, 15 yards downfield average depth of target is a long way down the field, and his catch percentage was below 50%. So he had 100 targets, but 48 catches. Look, if that goes to 120 targets and he can catch even 55 to 60% of those, right, it all changes, where he's all of a sudden now a 80 catch player, 70 or 80 catch player, as opposed to a 40, 50 catch player. And I think that's what unlocks for him. DJ Moore did have a 65% catch rate last year. Luther Burden 73, Colson Loveland 66. Roma Dunze, I think, was the odd man out. There was another, I forget the stat, but there was a stat that he was like one of the his targets were the longest from the snap. In other words, it was like very late he was targeted. He wasn't targeted early. He probably wasn't a lot of first read. You guys have a lot of first read stuff. I would think that a lot of that shifts towards Roma Dunze in year 3, where he's sort of the alpha, especially with DJ Moore gone. And I think that all three of them can return value, even at ADP, because Colson Loveland, I think, is a solved equation, don't you think? I mean, this is so. I'm with this. I think the whole offense is like one of those. It becomes a lot like the Dallas and Cincinnati offenses, which are
I think Colson Loveland, like you said, and Colson Loveland really is the biggest threat to like Brock Bowers, Trey McBride this year. I know he's expensive. He's the tight end 3, but he's tight end 3 for a reason. You're still getting enough delta between him and those two guys that it becomes a really big value in redraft and best ball. In Dynasty, I think the gap's even closer, where Loveland, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, you're able to get big Loveland and like a big plus for Trey McBride. That door is closed for a lot of like Loveland managers. They're not taking that, especially with the the question marks we have at quarterback in Arizona, and the new offense there potentially with Jeremiyah Love, and I think the gap between McBride and Loveland could be completely closed by the end of the season. Bowers has so much insulation because of his youth and just what we think he's going to be with Kubiak and the lack of wide receiver competition. But Loveland is just such a talented player, and now we've seen multiple games of double-digit targets for him down the stretch as like a 21-year-old. He's absolutely awesome player.
What's crazy too is he had 81 targets, I believe, last year. And by the way, I misquoted the targets for Rome Odunze, but you don't come at me. I was looking at the wrong thing because I was looking at this. Colson Loveland, of course, who started off a bit slow, right? He didn't have his first 50-yard game until week 9 when he had a 100-yard game, but nonetheless, he still didn't have another 50-yard game. He had only one more, but he kind of slowly started. But then, he had 81 targets through the 17 weeks. But I don't know if you saw his playoff line, but it was 13, 15, and 10 targets in those 3 games. Look, if we see anything in that realm from him, anywhere close to that, that's, I think, what's so tantalizing is we saw the ceiling in big games, and, and it worked for them too. He was successful in that. It wasn't like, oh, yeah, but he didn't really do much. Especially in that Detroit game, he kind of went off. And actually, the Green Bay game, he had that big play, but just incredible stuff from Colson Loveland. So I think we're going to see more targets for him this year. I think 100 is like in the bag for him, and I think all 3 of them get there. The running backs, I think, are also solved. Let's move to some of the offenses that I'm a little scared of, but I'm gonna ask the question this way. So Ashton, Jeanty, and Jeremiyah Love, we both think they're top 5 dynasty backs, right? Both are elite. I love them all. Easy 101. I traded for Ashton Jeanty. I traded the what do you think of this trade? The 104 and the 105 in this draft for Ashton Jeanty on a team that's competing. I think that's a great trade.
Yeah.
Right. So we agree on all this stuff, right? They're worth all this, but both of them are on offenses that we did not think about mentioning. What are your thoughts about these 2 players going into 2026? I actually think that the Jeremiyah Love offense is better than people are giving it credit for. I know you've got some concerns there as well, but what are your thoughts about these 2 players in the offense?
I don't really have any concerns in terms of like the dynasty angle here. Like, they're both such incredible players. They also both are top 6 NFL draft capital backs, which is so rare. You're getting like unicorn type draft capital for these players. And Ashton Jeanty showed us last year that he's more than capable of being a back that could give you a 70 catch season. Jeremiyah Love, that's already in the argument where Jeremiyah Love could catch a lot more passes this year than maybe a lot are predicting. There's some tape bros out there that see a lot of comparisons between him and like a peak Alvin Kamara, peak Christian McCaffrey as a pass catcher. So they're both incredibly insulated. I'm not worried about either. For me, I also think Jeremiyah Love, like you talk about the offense in Arizona. Yeah, I think the offense in Arizona, like in terms of the ecosystem around them, is really, really good. There are strong wide receivers. There's a strong tight end in Trey McBride. But I think Jeremiyah Love is a force of nature that's going to impose himself on this offense and be like the clear guy in the offense. Even with Trey McBride being like this alpha, Jeremiyah Love is it. I don't really have too many concerns. If anything, I have more concerns about Trey McBride being able to hold up his incredible value from last year. I think a Carson Beck taking over and then potentially a new rookie quarterback next year. So it could be Jacoby Brissett to start the year, Carson Beck taking over whenever Arizona starts off poorly. And I don't know how much of a like a leash Jacoby Brissett has to fail with. I think he's got to win some games.
Right.
You've got to see like a 2-4 start from Jacoby Brissett for him to hold on to that job. He starts out the year 1-5 or something worse than that. He's benched. He was 1-11 last year as a starter. So like we all get hyped about Jacoby Brissett because he put up all these top 12 numbers in fantasy, but like the beat reporters don't like him. The beat reporters seem to be embracing Carson Beck here. So I worry about Trey McBride breaking in with a new quarterback this year, then a new quarterback next year, and then you've got like the threat of Colston Loveland behind him and Brock Bowers. So I worry a little bit more about him. I don't worry at all about Jeremiyah Love. I think he's awesome. And I think when you look at like the people worried about like Tyler Algier and James Conner, like how long can that hold up for? I think Tyler Algier, they did sign him thinking that he would be the starter this year, but then Jeremiah Love became more and more clear that he was the best way for them to use that third overall pick, and they just took him. We've seen this before a million times. You saw this with like the Matt Flynn signing where Russell Wilson took over. You saw it last year a little bit with like Najee Harris, and then of course he gets injured in Omarion Hampton, and now like where's Harris right now? He's still on the streets right now. I think Jeremiah Love is inevitable. Ashton Jeanty's an interesting one, but when you look at the teammate touch competition, the lack of wide receivers there, I think is a net benefit to Ashton Jeanty, where there's not like he avoided like a AJ Brown or even like an Alec Pierce, where a guy that was going to command 100 plus targets, get those downfield looks. I don't know how much of like force feeding it to a Jalen Naylor or a Trey Tucker or a Jack Besh there's going to be. So really, Ashton Jeanty's so insulated by the receiving work he's going to have this year. And of course, really effective in terms of like the forced missed tackles. We know he's really good running ball. So I don't really have many questions about these guys at all. I think they're both incredibly insulated. And I think the real question is, which one do you like more? I think it might be Jeremiah Love. I think Jeremiah Love, when we go to like 2027, who's the biggest threat to be like the first overall pick in 2027 redraft leagues? I think it might be Jeremiah Love.
I agree. If the Raiders can find a way to like get a Jeremiah Smith or something like that, you know, and just sort of all of a sudden it all clicks into place for them, where like they've got the Bowers, the Jeanty, you know what I mean? It all kind of, there's some balance there. And if Mendoza hits, I think that's all, could be great for Jeanty as well. I mean, he's certainly a pass catcher as well. So all that tracks. I want to do this, man. I want to talk about this Carson Beck situation. Because I remember I had Felix Sharp on the show, a couple of years ago, and he was like a big Carson Beck fan. And I was like, I'm not so sure about this. So I started as an anti Carson Beck guy because I think he was talking about him as like the quarterback one of the class. Obviously not this class. It was, he's a 6th year player at this point. So maybe graded on a curve for that reason, but I want to understand, what is it about Carson Beck that we don't like?
I think with Carson Beck, I think that was kind of it, where when you were gauging him as like, this is a player you're supposed to consider it like a top 5 pick, then that becomes a guy that we're like, well, let's pump the brakes a little bit. Because there were times at Georgia where he didn't look good. When he was with Todd Monken, though, was when he had his like best season, where he had like the upper level coordinator in Todd Monken. He had a great year. And then, of course, last year with Miami, it was sort of a mixed bag, but he did win a number of big games, and he had over 70% completion percentage. So for me, I look at Carson Beck, and I do view him as a guy who's going to be a long-term backup quarterback in the NFL. But in terms of an opportunity, I think he's getting an opportunity to start. And we said a lot of the same things last year about Tyler Shuck. So, again, the quarterback position is like the hardest one.
Yes.
The quarterback position is like the hardest one for us to sort of evaluate versus like wide receiver, running back, tight end. I think like things happen with quarterbacks, and I think a lot of the mental game plays into a big factor where certain guys can get it at the NFL level, certain guys can't. But I will say one thing Carson Beck has going for him is he started many, many games in many, many big moments at the highest levels of college football for Georgia in the SEC, and then for Miami in the ACC, and also in, of course, the college football playoff. He beat Ohio State. So like,
yes,
the guy won a lot of games there, and he's going to get this early opportunity, and the completion percentages sort of lean into it. And then if we look at like ecosystem, how many rookie quarterbacks in the last 20 years have been able to step into having Jeremiah Love next to him, with Tyler Algier backing him up, Michael Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr. on the outside, and the best pass catching tight end we've ever seen at the NFL level in terms of receptions in a season in Trey McBride. So like, Carson Beck, I think he's the ultimate like sort of bridge guy, but you're going to have windows dynasty wise where you're going to be able to sell him for more than you pay for him in dynasty rookie drafts if he gets these starts.
I'm going to make the case for Carson Beck. I will say that when I look at the anatomy, right, we look at like, I'll just kind of run fast, like, career attempts, completion percentage, best in career, yards per attempt, best in career, interception percentage, best season passing yards, total touchdowns, best season, best rushing yard season, last season QBR, career touchdown interception percentage, passing yards per game, best season, quarterback rate, best in career. And you just sort of look at all that. And, the two best in this class that actually fit the anatomy of an elite quarterback are Fernando Mendoza and Carson Beck. Carson Beck doesn't get the draft capital or the early declare, where Fernando Mendoza does. I understand that's a very big difference. I do understand that. And the only other spot that really Carson Beck doesn't get there is rushing yards. So he's not a mobile quarterback. But if I look at, I'll just go to career quarterback rate. Only two players, and I mean, you can put Cole Payton in there too, but he had 284 career attempts, so that's completely disqualifying. Other than Cole Payton, the only two that hit those marks are Carson Beck at 106.1 and Fernando Mendoza at 107 career quarterback rate. And when I look at all the other things that he hits, the completion percentage, the attempts, the yards per attempt, his career, just go down the list. I actually did this tweet where I compared Fernando Mendoza and Carson Beck, and they were the same. And then for Mendoza, I said adorable. And for Carson Beck, I said punchable. I think a lot of this has to do with there's been some hate. He's fallen flat in a couple of big games, has Carson Beck, where, but he did get himself to the national championship. He has been pretty prolific.
There's the teammates love and embrace him. There was a little bit of that.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of that where some of the NFL scouts were talking about the Carson Beck, is he your locker room presence kind of guy? I think that matters in the NFL. I mean, you get these guys like Mendoza and Russell Wilson who are give the corny interviews, but they're able to command a lot. Jameis Winston, but they're endearing to their teammates, and the whole locker room embraces them, and that sort of can break ties with them being a starting quarterback. I really believe that. Carson Beck, does he have it? I don't know,
For sure.
But again, he good enough to start for Georgia and Miami, and Miami sure paid a lot of money to get him last year, and he took him, and he didn't screw it up.
Yep.
Got him to the national title.
It worked. Got him to a national championship game. I mean, right? So yeah, it's how much more could we have wanted from Carson Beck? Granted, yes, earlier declare, and we can nitpick, but I think in this system, as you point out, with Michael Wilson, Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., new offensive coordinator, offensive line is okay, and Jeremiyah Love, boy, oh boy, if he's any good, this could be an opportunity for him to shine. I'm just saying, I think he's an absolute smash at the 2-3 turn in your Superflex rookie drafts.
Yeah, game theory perspective, when you look at the players he's competing with this year at that level, it's some upside 2027 tight end bets and a vast number of wide receivers who we're hoping can give you a single wide receiver 2 season in their career. So yeah, I get it. Yep.
Right. That's right. That's exactly right. I don't hate players. I hate ADPs. If we're talking about Carson Beck at the 1-2 turn, I'd be like, bro, easy here. I mean, right. So it's always just in a terms of value. So, we talked about some of the bad offenses. I want to talk about some dirty production. I think there's, and I'm curious to hear. I put some players that I like in here, but I really want to hear some more, because here's the thing. I think in every season, especially right after the rookie draft, there's some guys who look at their rosters and they're like, they love all the rookies. They're like Jacoby Lane and Malachi Fields and Antonio Williams. They all look amazing, and they're like, dude, I can sell Jacoby Myers. I put a couple on there, Mike Evans and Terry McLaurin. I don't need those guys anymore. They're just clogging the way for Malachi Fields to get in there, right? There's a different type of hope to people and their roster, dynasty managers and their roster. So there's a lot of dirty production. Wide receivers, especially, I think. But I love Mike Evans. I think Terry McLaurin's going to have a big year. And if you can buy these types of players for very, very sharply discounted prices, sometimes even after the draft, you can take what was a 3rd round drafted wide receiver, a Ted Hurst, Jacoby Lane or something, and trade them almost straight up for an actual productive player. It's crazy, right? So what are your thoughts about that? And
I love the McLaurin one. He's been a big trade target for me kind of all off season long, where I think he's going to cook this year. David Blau's telling you how productive he's going to be. David Blau talked about getting him 10 targets a game. I get the Mike Evans one. Certainly our projections are into Mike Evans. But for me, Terry McLaurin, it's like he's the offensive focal point in Washington. And we were so enthusiastic to get him last offseason. He dodged a Jordan Tyson bullet. He dodged the Carnell Tate bullet. He dodged the Jeremiah Love bullet, dodged the Mekhi Lemon bullet. And there's the lack of wide receiver twos there, to the point that we're making a big arguments to go get Antonio Williams, and I've made the argument to get Chig Okonkwo because you want to get that secondary pass catcher in Washington. But I think there's a chance that Terry McLaurin at like 31 years old could end up having 150 targets this year and crush his previous target total. I think they're going to really lean into him. And does Jaden Daniels run as much as 2024? It doesn't seem like they want him to at such a high rate. So maybe a little bit more downfield downfield looks to McLaurin, maybe a couple easy button ones. I love that one. David Montgomery is sort of like the ultimate like ugly go and get him guy. I was able to get him in a couple of leagues. I think he could end up giving you a top 15 scoring season. Look at what Joe Mixon was able to do in this offense when he first got there. The dynasty marketplace didn't embrace it. Joe Mixon was getting traded for like that late day 3 selection, sort of like brushed to the side by dynasty managers, and then crushed it in Houston. Gave you like 13 weeks of like running back 1 production. I don't know if Montgomery gets there, but I think he's a top 15 running back scorer this year, and I think there's a chance it could be a 2-year shelf life. He's really good player. He's a good enough player that he also held back durable. Jahmyr Gibbs at times, who's like a next worldly talent for us.
Right.
And then when we're looking at like David Montgomery's cheap, Josh Jacobs is also cheap because Josh Jacobs is 28 years old. Yeah. But Green Bay showed you exactly what they think about Josh Jacobs this year based on what they did and what they didn't do in the NFL draft or in free agency. They lose Emmanuel Wilson, who is a player they seem to like, and they replaced him with air. It's Chris Brooks, and it's maybe our guy, my guy Marshawn Lloyd finally is a handcuff running back. But they're fine with it. They're like, it's Josh Jacobs. Maybe Jaden Reed is the backup running back when it's all said and done to get like Galaxy Brain. But Josh Jacobs is completely locked in. I think all 3 of those guys, if you're like searching for innings eaters, guys who can cook, and then you always have to this time of year. It's like the annual tradition. Seems like me and you have talked about this for like 3 straight years. If you're a Superflex contender right now, how do you not throw a couple of offers out there to the Matt Stafford owner? Unless his team is ready to run this year, unless his team is a clear top 4, top 5 contending roster, then he has to be open-minded to moving a quarterback at this level. The guy could easily pass for 40-plus touchdowns again. And I think that the Ty Simpson selection has sort of shown some fantasy managers that the end could be in sight. But that might be more of an Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love argument where it's like 2 or 3 more years before Simpson gets his go. And if you do get 1 year out of Matt Stafford, it's going to be maybe a Super Bowl season. So I think all those old guys are really fun to trade for at this time of year.
Yeah, I'll name 3 that are like, I think they're going to start for most of the season, maybe even 2 of them the whole season. Geno Smith, Kirk Cousins, and Aaron Rodgers. You have 3 guys who are free 99 in a lot of ways. I really like Geno the most out of all 3 of them. I think he's got the longest, shelf life. I think he's going to probably start the most games. Maybe Aaron Rodgers could outperform him this year, but I think that this is probably what Aaron Rodgers' final season, if he even comes back. I know it sounds like he's coming back. He's just waiting. But Geno actually could, I don't know, he could leverage this into another opportunity potentially. I don't really know. Probably not. But what are your thoughts about those?
I like the Geno Smith call out, which seems so weird that we're sort of back on Geno. But what have the Jets done the last month? They add Kenyon Sadiq in the first round, get exceptional speed. You've got a second round pick last year in Mason Taylor and Kenyon Sadiq in their 2 tight end packages. Sadiq can win with Yak. Even if you're not a huge Kenyon Sadiq hits big for fantasy, stylistically, he adds a dangerous element to the offense. They add Omar Cooper Jr., a player with incredible toughness, also speed, physicality, and a guy who won last year. And then you've got Adonai Mitchell back, who was good down the stretch, and Garrett Wilson. And then you have Breece Hall. Breece Hall gets paid.
Yes.
So Breece Hall is the face of the franchise. They give him a 3-year deal. Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson both have contract insulation. So I think both of those guys, like, any thoughts that like the team could move off of them, they're not. They have 3 first-round picks next year.
No.
But Geno Smith's in this like fun offensive environment where Geno Smith could give you a top 15 quarterback. It sounds gross to say, but he's so cheap right now. You're getting him for quarterback 3 price tag, and he could give you top 15 scoring production.
Yeah, I've got Geno Smith in a couple of like quarterback 2 slots where I'm like, I think I'm good. Like I was trying to fix that spot. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe obviously it's very fragile. It's very uncertain. But it also, you're right, the potential upside, and I'm hopeful that the floor is solid enough that I can stand on it without having to invest, other assets to fix it, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Because when you're managing a dynasty team, you don't want to have to, cut off your nose to spite your face, right? You don't want to lose production at another position just to fix something that maybe didn't need fixing. And I'm not sure if Geno Smith actually needs a fixing. He might actually be a bit of a fix himself.
Hey, listen, stranger things have happened, and there's a reason NFL teams keep going back to Geno Smith, and there's a reason, like, the non-fantasy guys always seem to push Geno Smith up in terms of, like, most talented NFL quarterback. I know it became sort of a joke last year. People were ranking him as, like, the 8th most talented quarterback, but now you don't have to make these big bets with Geno. Geno's, like, the forgotten man, and like you said, he's down there with, like, the Aaron Rodgers type bets for bottom-of-the-barrel superflex quarterback who could easily beat his ADP.
Anybody else that you're targeting? Like, I mean, are you crazy enough to think that Christian Kirk might be valuable this year and score fantasy points? It's a weird offense that Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, Stribling, and Pearsall. I mean, it could be that actually Kirk is the starting slot.
I'm not into Christian Kirk. I haven't gone with that one. I think an interesting one could be Chris Godwin, who could be in a situation where Godwin is like super, super cheap. You mentioned Ted Hurst, Jalen McMillan. There's guys out there. It's still Cade Otton at tight end. I think Kenneth Gainwell is interesting too, but I think Kenneth Gainwell is a really fun, especially if you have a hero RB type structure, or if you need guys you think could start at the running back position. I mean, me and you have had plenty of Bucky Irving conversations, but I think Kenneth Gainwell could be a big part of that passing game. But if he's not, it probably means Chris Godwin really beats his ADP once again. Everybody's into Emeka Egbuka, as they should be, but Godwin does have that familiarity with Baker Mayfield. We've seen Godwin have really, really effective seasons with Mayfield. So I think he's super, super cheap. Like we talked about the Mike Evans, Terry McLaurin tier. Godwin's like tiers below that in terms of how much he cost you. I think they're all really interesting. I mean, if we want to go like super, super, super duper gross, I've taken some shots on Greg Dulcich as like a bottom of the roster guy in tight end premium, where there's just no target competition. Could he end up in tight end premium formats? Is Greg Dulcich a guy who's going to end up as like the tight end 16 this year, just based on a consistent weekly role? And maybe that gets you a little bit of utility, especially in like deep, deep dynasty formats. I think he's interesting. Where are you at on Tony Pollard right now?
Isn't a bet for Tony Pollard a bet against Nick Singleton?
Yeah.
At this
it would be the Nick Singleton is a little bit more of like a round 5 Trey Benson type rookie, but Tony Pollard, I think Tony Pollard, he's so cheap. Like I talked about the Josh Jacobs, David Montgomery, he's not even in like the same stratosphere, but he's had 3 straight years of 1,000 rushing yards. And now the offense should be better. They get Carnell Tate, they get Wan'Dale Robinson. Do you get Tony and Dable? Do you get Tony Pollard in like a 18 to 20 touch per game role for like the first 8 weeks of the season? That alone is probably worthwhile based on his current cost in terms of like getting you there. And then if Singleton does become the next Cam Scatterbo, Tyrone Tracy, Brian Dable day 3 guy, you're still not going to see it week 1, barring an injury.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it's a scary buy, which is why it's a great buy, because the seller is probably motivated. It's it's a flood property. It's it's got a bad title. It's a car with a bad title. You don't want it, and so for that reason, it's a lot less money. So, I think Tony Pollard salvage title is the show title today.
Love it.
We got. Yeah, that's right. Yep. Tony Pollard just clunking along, but I mean, yeah, he's got a V8 or something like that. I don't know, man. Yeah, he's worth the price of admission, I think. Yeah, because that's that's an offense I'm not so confident in either. So that's one of those that I'm not so sure what you get, but for the price, I think you're absolutely right. I think Tony Pollard could absolutely get you there, especially if you have an early second. You can get Singleton as well. If you can get Singleton somewhere in your rookie draft and then trade for Tony Pollard, I love that. I love holding them both so that way I can win either way. Yeah. All right. What do you think, buddy? Tell everybody what you're doing over at Fantasy Points besides absolutely
everything. Dynasty Life is my Dynasty show. I think a lot of supporters of your show also listen to Dynasty Life. You've been on that. You're one of my most frequent guests for a reason. Then School of Scott, I record that with Scott Barrett. The one that and then the 2026 NFL Draft podcast that I did with Brett Whitefield, that was awesome. Was a good NFL draft season for me. I ended up becoming the most accurate NFL drafter in the entire country.
I took down the huddle report. Congratulations.
Now they all want to talk to me. Now all these NFL guys want to talk to me.
How much money did you win?
It's a bragging rights title. It's all bragging rights. All bragging rights for the huddle report. Yeah. So, but the huddle report was good. Like some of the maybe a couple of the quote unquote big NFL accounts might end up on the podcast this year because I beat them in the huddle report and now they want to talk to me.
I bet you won it with that final pick of the first round too. Didn't you have Jadarian Price?
No, I didn't. There? I had Caleb Lomu though. So the way that I had it locked up, and it was one of those things where it's like a surreal moment because last year I finished 9th. So I did well last year. There's usually they allow it's usually somewhere between 175 and 190 people, however many they let in that particular year. When I was a player profiler, I had one year where I was 30th, and I was like, okay, I'm getting, and then I kind of get more locked in. Last year was 9th. So when we got and I was paying attention last year. Last year I was like, okay, maybe I'm going to get there. Finished 9th. I was 8th or 9th, did well. And then this year I was completely not paying attention. I know that I had a bunch of picks that hit, but we were streaming the entire first round, and it was just Scott Barrett, Brett Whitefield, and myself, and then John Hansen and Ryan Heath would join us for moments, and then D-Bro joined us at the end. Yeah. But I wasn't paying attention. I knew during the first 10 picks, I told Brett Whitefield, I'm like, hey, I got 6 of the first 10 or 5 of the first 10 or something, and then I kind of forgot about it. Then a couple of those offensive linemen started hitting that I had matched up. I had Monroe Freeling, landing where he landed. Ian Achor, I had landing with Pittsburgh. So I was like, okay, it must be doing okay. But I still didn't realize anything till the 25th pick. I get a text message from our friends, Cody Carpentier and Alex Dunlap. And Alex Dunlap sends me a tweet saying, Theo Gremminger and Todd McShay are now tied for first. So I'm like, okay, I'm tied for first in the huddle report with 6 picks to go. And then bang, bang, Omar Cooper to the Jets, Caleb Lomu to the Patriots. I locked it up. I couldn't lose at that point. And then Lance Zierlein ended up finishing second because he hit the Jadarian Price pick, but he was way behind me. So I locked it up. The Caleb Lomu to New England was the one where everybody had Caleb Lomu going earlier. I had him lasting till 31 going to New England, so that sort of pushed it over the top. But yeah, man, it was good. I'm hoping to do it again next year.
Love it.
A lot of interesting people want to talk to me now. And I love it. I had Evan Silva on the podcast after, and he took it down in 2018, and we were just kind of flexing for fantasy football, where all these guys will talk about how they're connected to
right.
Oh, I was text messaging with this general manager last week, and and I'm okay,
right,
buddy.
yes.
Well, I wasn't texting with any general managers, but I sort of could figure it out a little bit too. So it was fun. I don't know if I could do it again. Now my next goal is they have the 5-year average, where last year I did well and this year, so maybe I can get in there. And my big board, first year I ever did a big board, I was top 8 in the big boards too. So podcasting, you do enough content with stuff, you start to get into the weeds a little bit. And like anything, it's like fantasy football, NFL. Awesome. It's you can figure things out and be accurate. And there we go. So it was a fun one, man. It was fun.
You wonder why I love Theo from the beginning when I met you. Right. When we were both nobody, we're still nobody, but you did great, buddy. I'm really proud of you. I love you. You're my brother. I appreciate you, bro. Nice job. Nice job. Bravo. Give him a round of applause. How'd that feel? How How would it feel to just beat everybody? McShay, Jeremiyah, all these guys, the
Beat 'em
big
all.
names,
Mel
all
Kiper
the
who?
plugged-in
Mel Kiper who?
guys. You're like, listen,
Mel
guys, maybe you
Kiper
should
who?
just call me.
Yeah, that's
Just
right.
call me. I'll
That's
tell you
right.
what's going to happen. I know what's going on. Nice job, Theo. And with that, on behalf of everybody here at OTC, on behalf of everybody here at The Undrafted, on behalf of the greatest podcast producer to ever walk the land, Mr. Michael P. Duncan, and Smitty, you have been joined by the champion, Theo Gremminger. I am Jax Falcone. We are out.